Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. We will begin shortly. All right, again, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. My name is Will Crosswell, the Vice President of Service and Sales for Arden Credit Union, and this is our fourth virtual workshop, and sometimes technology is not the easiest to use, so please be patient with us. And we know we have a lot going on in our lives right now, but know that Arden Credit Union is here for you. So whether it's saving money through fees or possibly refinancing your home, just know that we're here to help with whatever need you may have. So if you need to ask a question during the workshop, please click the Questions tab and type in your question. The photo to the left is the screen of an iPad, and the photo to the right is the screen of a desktop. We have Lisa from Arden's marketing department on the line who will relay the questions to Kelly during the seminar. So there will also be a Q&A session after the workshop. Also, if you are viewing the workshop from a smartphone, you will have to swipe right to see the PowerPoint. So without further ado, let's have our guest speaker tonight. Kelly is a registered dietitian and the owner of Wayne Nutrition LLC. Take it away, Kelly.
Great, thanks so much for having me. So everyone's quarantined right now, so I always say what a better opportunity to focus on nutrition and healthy habits. So today I'm going to be talking to you about nutrition for active kids. And oh, you know what? Technology is not working with me. Give me 1 second. Let's see. There we go. So here's kind of an outline of what I'll be talking to you about. So I'll go through a little intro of why it's important to care about what your kids eat and kind of talk to you about the different food groups, how much kids need to be eating. For those of you that have children that are pretty athletic, I'll talk to you a bit about meal planning around athletic events. I'll give you meal ideas, snack ideas, because I know oftentimes when I meet with mothers, they're like, I have no idea what my kids should be eating. So hopefully I'll clarify some of that stuff. I did add a topic on picky eaters because I know most people I work with, they have at least one kid that's an extremely picky eater. So I'll kind of go through some tips to encourage your kids to try new foods and to get them beyond eating just chicken nuggets and pizza. And throughout the presentation, I will, as Will mentioned, have time to answer some questions that you write in about. And then at the end, I will answer any questions that you have at the end of the presentation. So here's just a bit about me. So I'm a very local girl. I was born and raised in Berwyn. I live in Wayne right now. I went through all the different East Town schools, Beaumont, TE, and Conestoga. I then went on to Penn State main campus to obtain my Bachelor's of Science in Nutritional Sciences. And then I went right to the University of Delaware after that for a combined dietetic internship and master's program in human nutrition. After that, I got my start in the nutrition world working for Club La Maison Health and Fitness, where I basically had to build a nutrition program from scratch. So I was there for 5 years and gradually built it up. And then in 2015, I left them to open my own practice, Wayne Nutrition LLC, which is right over in the Stratford buildings, kind of near the farmer's market. And at my current position, I do one-on-one nutrition counseling and mostly for people that have insurance, because most insurance companies now cover nutrition at 100% as a preventative benefit, which I'll talk to you about. So yeah, it's a really fun job. I talk to people of all different backgrounds and with different concerns, from diabetes to sports nutrition. I work with children, I work with vegans, so all types. So just to kind of go through an intro of why you should care about what your kids eat. Obviously, if your kid's eating better, it will increase their energy levels throughout the day. If they're athletic or they're using their muscles at all, eating properly will help build and repair muscle, aid in optimal growth. Interestingly enough, if you eat better, you tend to sleep better. And then, of course, the healthier you eat as a child, the more likely you are to be a healthier eater as you get older. And so definitely kids that are exposed to a variety of foods from a younger age are more accepting of a varied diet as an adult. There's a lot of research, which I'll show you a little bit of, that eating healthy as a child can really help brain development and help with cognition and help with better time management skills. Obviously, can lower the risk of injury. So if you're not eating correctly, you're not going to be building bones properly, which can increase the risk of stress fractures and things like that. If you're not eating enough as a child, that can definitely cause stunted growth, delayed puberty, menstrual dysfunction, and bone loss. And then obviously on the flip side of that, if kids are eating too many calories, that can lead to obese children, which definitely comes with its fair share of health risks. So here's just some samplings from a few studies. So this one showed that students with a higher fruit and vegetable intake and a lower intake of calories from fat were significantly, so 41% less likely to fail a literacy test compared to students with the lowest diet quality scores. So basically, the healthier eaters performed way better on tests than the unhealthy eaters. And then children with higher diet quality scores had higher self-esteem, fewer emotional problems, and fewer peer problems independent of weight status. So that's basically saying not dependent upon weight. So if a kid's overweight or thin, it didn't matter. It was solely based on their diet. That kids that had a better diet felt better about themselves, worked with their peers better, had higher self-esteem. And then if you're not eating enough, in elementary school age children, they found that that caused slower cognition, poor attention, learning and memory problems, and visual perception. So if your kid struggles with not being able to pay attention or can't seem to remember things, maybe it's time to look at their diet and try to improve that. So far, are there any questions out there, Lisa?
Kelly, so far we do not have any questions. But just as a reminder, if you do have a question, you can click the questions tab on your dashboard, type in your question, and we will communicate them to Kelly.
All right, very good. So now I'm going to kind of dive into nutritional needs for children. And so this is showing you my plate, which replaced the old food guide pyramid. And this is what the government came out with, the USDA. So basically showing that like fruits and vegetables should really make up almost half of a person's diet, and then grains, protein, and then a little bit of dairy. So here's just kind of a breakdown for the differences between boys and girls. So I used ages 9 to 13. I wasn't really sure exactly how old the kids that all of you have are, but I figured 9 to 13 is a pretty safe age range. So you'll see for calories, it's greatly varied. And that's obviously because if you have a 13-year-old boy, some 13-year-old boys could be 5 feet tall, some could be 6 feet tall. So it definitely depends on size and also activity level. So that's why the calories range so much there. But you will see common themes of basically, on average, I would say children need about 5 ounces of protein, fruit, basically two pieces of fruit a day, tons of vegetables, which most kids are not hitting at all. Grains, they need a lot. So that's like breads and cereals. Dairy or dairy equivalents, 3 cups to aid in proper growth of those bones. And when I say dairy equivalents, I basically consider any type of drink like almond milk, flax milk, any of those types of milks, as long as they have at least 25% of the daily value of calcium per cup and vitamin D, then I would consider that a dairy equivalent. And then the thing that people are most surprised about is that kids need a ton of water. And that's because they're moving a lot, they're growing a lot, and water is involved in every aspect of metabolism. So child athletes, basically the types of foods don't really change that much from their less active peers. A lot of kids that are very active obviously will need more calories and more fluids because they're going to be sweating more. But for all kids, basically the protein recommendation is not that high. So only 10 to 15% of calories should be coming from protein. On the contrary of that, most adults are eating close to 30% of their calories coming from protein. So kids don't actually need that much protein. Carbohydrates should definitely be where the bulk of their calories come from, followed by fats. And then the general rule of thumb on water is if your kids between the ages 4 and 8, they need about 7 cups of water a day. So a cup being 8 fluid ounces. Older than that, they need 9 up to 14 cups a day, which is a lot. Most people are not doing that. That's also factoring in fluids that they're getting from other things. So if they do drink milk, they are going to be getting some liquid from that too. Should make that clear. So just to kind of dive in a little bit more on protein, I would recommend trying to choose lean proteins most of the time. So there I'm talking about fish, shellfish, chicken, turkey breast, eggs, beans, and legumes, and really trying to stay away from the fried and breaded proteins. So again, like the chicken nugget type products, I wouldn't have them on a regular basis. And then red and processed meats. I really don't have any clients eating a lot of red and processed meats just because those are consistently linked with the highest rates of heart disease, diabetes, colon cancer, and premature death. So a little kid could, eat a hot dog here or there, but I just wouldn't make it, a couple of days a week. And just to kind of give you a visual, so I said that on average between the boys and the girls, it looks like a child 9 to 13 years old needs about 5 ounces of protein. So to give you a visual, a deck of cards is what 3 ounces of protein looks like. So basically, kids don't really need more than 3 ounces or a deck of cards at any one time because they can't actually absorb more protein than that. Carbohydrates, so again, the bulk of where their calories should be coming from. Carbs are found in sugar, fruits, grains, and dairy. So all of these things will break down to sugar eventually. Some just break down quicker than others. So I want you to limit refined carbohydrates, which was sugar. So that would be anything made with enriched wheat flour or white flour. And the problem with that is there's no fiber or anything. So again, it breaks down to sugar almost immediately. So if you find your kids snacking on pretzels and then they're wired, it's because those pretzels break down to sugar almost instantaneously. And then you also should be aware of added sugars in products. So even if something is a healthy whole grain, like for example, I was just looking at the label of Total cereal. The first ingredient is whole grain, but the second ingredient is sugar. So that's still not ideal. And my recommendation in general for like bread or cereal type products is try to keep it to less than 5 grams of added sugar per serving, or for 2 slices of bread. And then just be conscious of like protein or energy bars, just because typically that means sugar. And when you're buying bread or cereals, look for 100% whole grain. So that would be 100% whole wheat bread. Other grains that you can cook that are whole grain would be oats, farro. People are not that familiar with farro, but it's becoming more trendy. I always tell my clients, most people that I introduce it to love it. It's a big grain. It kind of looks like brown rice. It's delicious. You can make a risotto out of it. And that you can typically find at like a Whole Foods type store or Wegmans. Barley's pretty common. You'll find that at most supermarkets. And then quinoa. Some people are familiar with this, some people aren't, but quinoa is a grain that's like little tiny balls. So there's a lot of interesting recipes out there for kids that you can use these grains for. I basically tell clients you can use them anywhere you would use pasta or rice in a recipe, but certainly you're going to find like quinoa mac and cheese recipes and things like that. That would just make it a little bit healthier than if you used pasta. And And then just a note on gluten-free, because a lot of people have the misconception that all gluten-free products are healthy, or that going gluten-free would be healthier than eating whole other grains. I always say to people, if you don't have to be gluten-free, don't, because it's very challenging to eat healthy grains if you are eating gluten-free. So any of my clients that have celiac or have to be on a gluten-free diet, I have them basically cook all their grains. So cooking like oatmeal, and then using exotic grains like amaranth, millet, buckwheat, which are not that common and most people are not super familiar with. Just because most of the gluten-free products on the market are made with like refined rice. They typically add a decent amount of sugar to them. They're generally made of rice or corn, so are not going to be nearly as healthy as if you had eaten a whole grain, such as like farro or barley, or even whole wheat. So just a comparison of breads and what to look for. So the bread on the left is labeled wheat bread. So don't be tricked by that, because if you look at the ingredients, the first ingredient is enriched wheat flour. That's just white flour. So that's bad. You'll see whole wheat flour is in the mix, but it's not the first and only flour ingredient. So I would not encourage buying that. Kind of on this note, you'll see a lot of multigrain breads out there. And same thing, you have to look at the ingredients, because multigrain just means there's multiple grains. So just make sure you're looking at the ingredients, and it should say 100% whole grain on the front of the bread. The bread on the right, you'll see I highlighted whole wheat flour, and that's the only source of flour in there. So that is a good, fine 100% whole grain bread. And then here I'm just showing you, again, 2 food labels. So the one on the left is from a Cliff Bar, and you'll see the first ingredient is organic brown rice syrup. So it kind of sounds healthy because it's organic and it's brown rice, but it's syrup. So that means it's just sugar. So I don't necessarily recommend these bars unless a kid is going to be eating this and then like running for an hour or 2 straight. Like this would be something you could eat right before a sporting event to burn it off, but don't just eat it to have it as a snack. But even that being said, the bar on the right, I think this is a RX bar. You'll see the ingredients are super natural. So the ingredients are dates, egg whites, almonds, cashews, chocolate. So dates is where the sugar is coming from. So that's a much healthier alternative. So I definitely encourage, if you have to do a protein bar with your kids, try to make it more of these healthier, like nut and fruit-based ones. And then just talking quickly about fats. So fats do make up the bulk of the, not the bulk, but a lot of the calories for kids. So I just want you to be conscious of limiting saturated fats. So that's going to be like butter, bacon fat, lard. Not many people are cooking with lard anymore. And even coconut oil. I get asked about coconut oil all the time, and my response is basically there's not enough research to support the use of coconut oil. Like you Google it, and apparently coconut oil does amazing things. I think it is great for like skin and nails, like actually applying it to your skin, but actually consuming it has shown to increase like the bad cholesterol levels and can potentially increase the risk of heart attacks. So there's not a ton of like solid research showing that it has all these major health benefits like people want you to believe. So as I choose healthy fats that are high in monounsaturated fats, so that's going to be like olive oil, canola oil, avocado oil. I'm a huge advocate of. Avocados are great. They're super healthy, and hummus. And then avoid trans fat. So trans fat you may have heard about in the news a couple years ago, like New York City like banned restaurants from using trans fat just because it's shown to increase the bad cholesterol, decrease the good cholesterol, and is very inflammatory. But you still will find products that have trans fat in them, even if they're labeled trans fat free. So you have to look at the label, and if it has any hydrogenated oil, that's bad, that's trans fat. So you can still find that in things like a lot of coffee creamers still have it, whipped cream topping type things, the frozen whipped toppings. Even a lot of baked goods still have it. I know I was just in the supermarket last year, I guess, at this point, and I was looking at the Irish soda bread, and the supermarket had used hydrogenated oil in that Irish soda bread. So you want to avoid that. And yeah, so if it has less than half a gram of trans fat per serving, it can be listed as trans fat free. And then fluids. So I talked to you about how kids need a lot of fluids. So basically, kids and adults should be choosing water most of the time. So limiting sugar sweetened beverages, even Gatorade. So Gatorade has sugar added to it, but it also has salt added to it. So if kids are just drinking this freely throughout the day, they're getting a lot of extra sugar and salt in their diet that is unnecessary. During hot, sweaty sporting events, it'd be fine to consume because they actually need it at that point. But if they're just like sitting around watching a movie, I would advise against the Gatorade or any sports drink like that. Coconut water, so not coconut oil, but coconut water is actually a really good substitute for things like Gatorade or Powerade because it's all natural and it does have a lot of the electrolytes that you would be looking for during athletic events. Unsweetened herbal and green teas are fantastic. They're super healthy, so kids can certainly drink those. And then for athletic children, like sometimes they will need more than 10 cups a day or 80 fluid ounces, depending on the sweat and activity level for that day. All right, and then just 2 nutrients of concern that kids often have trouble getting in. So the first is calcium. Kids are growing so rapidly that they need a ton of calcium as they grow. So the easiest way to get that in would be things from milk, yogurt, cheese, and then to a lesser extent, seeds such as poppy, sesame, and chia seeds are all good. Wing and white beans, so like cannellini beans, white navy beans, and almonds are actually a good source of calcium. And then iron, especially for girls as they start to get closer to puberty, they need more iron. So lean meats, chicken, tuna, eggs, soy, so tofu and edamame are actually really good sources of iron. The fortified grains and just whole grains in general, such as the whole wheat breads, are a good source of iron. If your kids like shellfish or clams, oysters, mussels, those are fantastic. Lentils, pumpkin seeds, and quinoa. All right, at this point, any questions?
Kelly, we actually do have a couple questions that came in. So our first question is, what if your child has expressed zero interest in eating protein, mainly chicken, beef, etc.?
Yep. Yeah, no, that's a very common thing. And that's why I stress that kids don't need a lot of this. So you can see that one of the recommendations, like on the lower calorie side, was that some kids ages 9 to 13 only need like 4 ounces of protein. So just slightly more than a deck of cards each day. So if you can get them to eat like 2 ounces of chicken, that'd be great, but they don't have to. If they're willing to eat eggs, that would be fine. Or I know a lot of kids are into edamame, which is like the little green soybeans that you'll find at a Japanese restaurant or now in freezer bags. So eggs, edamame, or other beans or lentils would count there. So those would all be good sources. There's other sources of protein too that if the kid's really unwilling to eat things, but I would just try to kind of diversify, and I will give you more ideas later in the presentation about other things that you could incorporate that would be protein. But I know, yeah, a lot of kids will not eat like the chicken and meats of the world.
Okay, so our next question is, our guest has a picky 2-year-old who is extremely active, and she's having trouble figuring out what to feed her. Any suggestions on how to get her to eat more veggies and fruit?
Yeah, so that's interesting because I went to a conference literally the Friday before the whole quarantine started. And the lady there was talking about extreme picky eating. And it was interesting because it's really around age 2 where you will notice kids start to become picky eaters. Prior to that, they kind of are generally more open to trying different things. But around age 2, they start to learn that they have a say. So, I mean, to get them eating more fruits and vegetables, the easiest thing is to kind of just like mash it up and blend it into different things. So like, I know my daughter's only 8 months old, but the other day I did like mashed cauliflower mixed with mashed sweet potato, but sometimes I'll mix like fruit with it too. So that's one idea, is just mixing and mashing. And also just trying a ton of different things and maybe not pointing out that it's a vegetable, but just kind of just feeding it to her, see what she likes.
Okay, we have another question about if you have any recommendations to get a 4-year-old to sit down and eat dinner instead of eating a little bit of his dinner and then just snacking the rest of the night.
Yeah, so that's tricky because the expert recommendation is always just have your kid eat dinner and don't let them have anything else afterwards. Like if they don't want to eat their dinner, say fine, but don't allow them to have snacks afterwards. Easier said than done, I realize. But you know, your kid's not going to starve that one night, but some kids are really good about if they don't want to eat dinner, then they won't eat anything. But I would just kind of keep trying that, where like you feed them dinner. If they won't eat it, then just don't allow them to have snacks, because they know that if they don't eat their dinner, then, you know, maybe mom will give them applesauce later. Like they're kind of holding out for the treats that they would prefer to eat.
Okay, and we have one more question for now, and it is, what are your thoughts on sunflower oil? Is it good for you, or would you recommend something else?
Yeah, sunflower oil is fine. Yeah, it's a healthy oil. It's, again, my favorite oil for cooking and things like that would be avocado oil, just because I think avocados have the healthiest makeup of fat out of basically any food on earth. And avocado oil is you can use it for a lot of things because it has a high smoke point. So it's great for things like stir fries, but it has like a light flavor. So it's good for salad dressings and marinades. But yeah, so, I mean, if you like sunflower oil, that's totally fine.
All right, and those
All
are all of
good?
our questions we had for right now.
All right, very good. So here, to kind of answer some of your questions, here's some more ideas for what you could be feeding your kids. So, and I guess, again, this is age dependent, but like a lot of kids just want to have a bowl of cereal for breakfast. So that's where I would try to make it a whole grain, low sugar cereal. So things like bran flakes. And I always stress, like, bran flakes do have a little bit of sugar in them. So it's not like they're going to taste like cardboard. So there's still sugar in them. Straight up plain Cheerios is actually totally fine, because pretty much the only ingredient is oats. So Cheerios are perfect. If your kid will eat those, great. Trader Joe's kind of has their own take on Cheerios. They're called high fiber O's. They're a little bit harder than Cheerios. So I often have clients use that like as a snack for their kids. Especially younger kids, it's like an easy food that they can eat themselves. And then Nature's Path makes a heritage flakes. And then I would just serve that with milk and fruit. Another breakfast idea is, instead of buying just the instant oats, make your own oatmeal for your child. So using like old-fashioned oats, cook it with milk to get in the dairy, maybe like half a banana or half a cup of berries or whatever fruit your child likes, cinnamon if they like it. If you can sneak some seeds in there, that would be great. Add some honey or maple syrup to make it sweeter. And if your kid likes that, fantastic. I would feed them that every day. You can also make yogurt parfait. So if you can do plain yogurt with fruit, you could add a touch of honey to that. That would be great. But there are some decent yogurts now on the market that are lower sugar. So Chobani now makes a less sugar yogurt. Faye has a true blend now, which is lower sugar. But even some of the other brands like Oikos, most of their products don't have a ton of added sugar. So those would be fine. And then I might mix in fruit, a granola, or like a high fiber Twiggy cereal and kind of make just a parfait out of that. Kodiak cakes are quite popular now. I don't know if you guys are all familiar with them, but basically they're whole grain pancake mix, but they have added whey protein to them. So they have fiber and protein. So they're more of a well-balanced breakfast as opposed to the traditional pancake, which is just refined carb. So I would serve that and maybe like heat up strawberries so they get like a little bit syrupy, throw them on top, and then serve it with milk or something that would have protein or dairy. So they could eat a yogurt on the side too. An easy breakfast you could do also would be just like a whole wheat English muffin with an egg and cheese, maybe some fruit on the side, and then milk if you can get that in. Or a lot of kids like smoothies, and I know when they are going to school, getting them breakfast is sometimes a problem. Like I have a lot of young clients that tell me they don't have time for breakfast because they have to wake up really early to go to school. So I often recommend that they transport their breakfast. So like while they're getting driven to school or on the school bus, drink a smoothie. So kefir or kefir is basically a liquid yogurt. So it's a milk that has added probiotics to it. And you will find that at most supermarkets now. It might be in like the healthy refrigerated aisle, but you'll see Lifeway is a brand. Siggy's makes one. At Trader Joe's, they have their own brand of it. But I would try to encourage you to do the plain with fruit. You can actually throw oats in it, which might sound a little bit weird, but when you blend it up, it's just going to thicken it, and then that will help keep your kid fuller longer. And then just to bulk up the protein, I would add a whey protein. But be careful because a lot of the whey proteins out there that are flavored have artificial sweeteners. So I would read the label carefully and make sure there's no aspartame or sucralose. Some decent brands would be, there's a brand called Less Naked. There's a brand called Orgain and Vega. There's a couple of brands out there that are better, and some that use stevia, which I feel slightly better about than just aspartame or the laboratory made ones. So different lunch ideas. So if your kid's willing to eat a sandwich, fantastic. I would do like a turkey and cheese sandwich on whole wheat bread. I get the question like, oh yeah, but deli turkey isn't good for you. Right, so it's not as ideal as if you were to roast a turkey and use that. So by all means, if you have the time and want to roast chicken or turkey and use that in your kid's lunch, fully advocate that. If you are strapped for time and don't have a lot of energy to, be cooking all the time, then low sodium deli turkey is not the worst thing in the world. If you get motivated and want to slice up a part of an avocado and throw that on there, go for it. Or you could use a little bit of mayonnaise for some fat. And then if your kid's willing to eat raw vegetables and hummus, that would be fantastic. I know a lot of young kids are really into Chipotle nowadays. So I have them make a burrito bowl. So instead of using rice, that's again where I would have them use the whole grains like quinoa, barley, or farro. Throw in some black beans, some veggies in there. And then for the dressing, just mix plain Greek yogurt. So thinking of that like a sour cream kind of with salsa and guacamole. Kids love it. A chicken avocado wrap. You could even heat this so that the cheese melts, or make it like a quesadilla, like on a pan. But a whole wheat tortilla with chicken, cheese, avocado, and again, trying to get some fruits and vegetables on the side. Or something I call a hodgepodge lunch, because I've learned after talking to all my child clients that apparently a lot of kids don't actually eat lunch anymore, or they're unwilling to bring a lunch box because I guess kids don't use their lockers anymore. So these types of things you don't really need to keep cold. So edamame, again, if you don't know what edamame is, I would look it up, because if your kid likes it, it's a great source of protein and fiber. But they do sell a dry roasted edamame. So that's a fantastic snack that doesn't need to be refrigerated. It's super healthy. You can get that at most stores now. Sometimes it's going to be in the perimeter of the vegetable aisle. But they do sell the frozen edamame, which you could also steam. So that would be the protein. Do some crackers, vegetables, and hummus. And then together, that's kind of a well-balanced meal because you're getting protein, vegetables, and a whole grain. For snacks, for all of my clients from ages 2 to 85, I would say I usually just recommend, my go-tos would be yogurt, fruit, and nuts. But certainly like things like part skim cheese stick would be fine. Again, if you have to do bars, there's better bars than others. So there I'm listing like RX bars are decent. Kind bars are fine. The Kashi Trail Mix bars are pretty good. Or if your kid's really active and needs a lot of calories, like a whole grain bread with peanut butter or almond butter on it. Could even throw half a banana on that. And if you're at home, so during the quarantine, big into making smoothies out of yogurt or kefir. If your kid's willing to eat cottage cheese, that would be a good thing to mix with fruit. Cheese and whole grain crackers, vegetables and hummus. Or again, like a snack could be a low sugar cereal and milk. And then here's just a slew of dinner ideas. I'm just trying to promote brainstorming and give you, kind of allow you to think outside of the box. So a lot of kids like Chinese food. So my go-to for young kids is like a stir fry, because that will help get in some vegetables. So if they're really picky, like just try to use the vegetables that they like and maybe try to sneak in something that they're unaware of, like the zucchini noodles, or like I use a vegetable peeler and just like peel whatever vegetable so you can't really tell what it is. Throw in a protein, so there's chicken, shrimp, tofu, again, the edamame over a whole grain. Bean pastas are super popular right now. So those I'm talking about, like Banza makes a chickpea pasta. You'll find lentil pastas. Barilla makes one. Trader Joe's has one. But those are made just of beans. So that's your protein. So you basically just need to add vegetables to it. Grilled chicken, sweet potato, vegetables, if they're willing to eat that. I referenced chicken nuggets earlier. So if you can make your own chicken nuggets, that would be great. Just using whole grain breadcrumbs and kind of breading and baking the chicken. If you have an air fryer, even better, because you can make them like taste really good. And then tacos, very popular among the kids. So you can make tacos with ground chicken or ground turkey. Or if your kids are not into that, you could just use, again, like black beans, chilies, fish, omelets. I'm a huge advocate of, or frittatas, because again, you can sneak some vegetables in there. Or turkey burgers are all good ideas. And I think I have a handout attached, or you'll get emailed, that has all these ideas listed. So any questions right now?
No, we don't have any questions right now.
All right, very good. So now I'm going to move on to meal planning around athletic events. I forget, did we do a poll to find out how many people have kids that are pretty active?
We did not.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to go through this. So if your kid, basically here I'm talking about, this is more for kids that are like very involved in sports. And, you know, if your kid goes from baseball practice to lacrosse practice, or has a couple of hours of a game or tournament on a weekend, then that's kind of what I'm talking about here. So my main recommendation is do not try new foods on the day of an athletic event. Always a bad idea. You'll see that some kids often like don't feel well, and they will be like, oh, well, we stopped at this restaurant before, so they ate something new that didn't work out for them. Eat a meal. So like I'm talking about a bigger meal. Try to plan that at least 2 hours before whatever sporting event. Like if they're in a soccer game, I wouldn't have them eat a big bowl of pasta like half an hour before they're out on the field, because that will definitely cause stomach aches. You want to get carbs, fat, protein, and definitely water before any major sporting event. So if it's in the morning, like cereal with milk and fruit would be good. If it's at lunch, turkey sandwich. Dinner, quinoa and chicken. But you don't want to go too high fiber before the sporting event, just because, again, that will cause GI distress. And so for early morning events, like, so maybe your kid has an 8 o'clock soccer game, and they're probably unwilling to eat a big breakfast at 5 a.m. So maybe just give them a little snack before the event and then feed them the meal afterwards. So like an hour or two, maybe like a tiny bowl of cereal, or just like a fruit and yogurt, or like something small, but that will give them substance. If they're at like an all-day tournament, you should give them fruit or fruit juice, because that will give them enough sugar for their muscles to be running off of, so that they can perform for several hours. And then after the athletic event, like that's the most important time to consume something, because that's when the muscles need to be replenished. So ideally within 2 hours of them finishing up, try to get carbs, fat, protein, definitely liquids. And then I just gave you some quick, like if you have to travel back home 2 hours after a lacrosse tournament, fruit and yogurt would be a good thing to get in them right after, or like a smoothie, or even just like a Kachi trail mix bar. And sorry, I kind of like rushed through that, but does anyone have questions on the athletic events?
Nope, you are okay. Go right ahead.
All right, so I know this is often of interest, dealing with picky eaters. The good news, I should say, is that most people will find that picky eaters, as they get older, they become less picky. Like they become more open to trying new things. Like, I mean, I always tell my young clients, like I used to hate walnuts. Now I eat walnuts every day. I used to hate onions and mushrooms. Now I eat, like, and that started in high school. I started eating more of these foods. On the contrary, unfortunately, I do have some clients that they're now teenagers and they're very picky, and their moms report that when they were younger, they were not that picky. So hopefully that doesn't happen to you. But basically, dealing with picky eaters, you want to make sure that there's routine. And I always stress with all of my clients, routine is the most important thing. So try to keep the eating schedule fairly similar day to day. I realize that weekends, like your kid might sleep a little bit later, so their breakfasts and their lunch times might be a little bit off. But try to keep the meals as similar as possible and like at similar times each day, so that will create natural hunger cues. And again, kind of, I touched on this earlier, try to just have one main family meal. So I know it's very difficult when one of your kids like is unwilling to eat, like if you made fish for everyone at dinner and everyone eats it except for little Tommy, try to only serve that. Like, don't give Tommy chicken nuggets, because then he's never going to learn to even like or try the fish. So if Tommy doesn't want to eat the seafood, that's fine. He can skip the protein for that meal. It's not the end of the world. He's not going to die from that. But just try to always have just one family meal. And that also makes your life less stressful, because then you don't have to be a short order cook and making 5 different meals for everyone. So if tonight you want to make whole wheat pasta and ground turkey with broccoli, make that. Tell your family that's what it is. That's what your meal is. And if they don't like it, fine. They can make their own thing. And then just to kind of get your kid exposed to different things, try serving foods a variety of ways. So if your kid says they don't like sweet potatoes, maybe try baking the sweet potato or grilling the sweet potato and letting the syrup really come out. Because if you microwave the sweet potato, they might not like it. Or something I picked up from this conference about really picky eaters is the speaker suggested making orange French fries. So just telling your kid, all right, if you don't want a regular sweet potato, let's make orange French fries out of it. And they might be more open to trying it if it looks like a food that's familiar to them. If your child doesn't like grilled chicken, again, you could try like breading it in whole wheat breadcrumbs and baking it and making it more like a chicken nugget type thing. I always recommend try grilling vegetables, because most people find grilled vegetables taste better. But if your kid doesn't like the grilled vegetable, again, try spiralizing it or try shredding it. Try like cutting it up, throwing it in different recipes and trying to create different meals with it. Kind of in tune with that is how cauliflower is all the rage now. So previously, a lot of people didn't like cauliflower, but now that it's cauliflower rice and you can make mashed cauliflower or cauliflower pizza crust, way more people are eating cauliflower. And then also a huge suggestion would be take your kid food shopping. Maybe not now during the quarantine, but in normal life, take your kid to the grocery store, allow them to pick out something that they want to cook. And most likely, if they make it, they will eat it because they've created it. So they're proud of it. And just definitely try to get them involved in the cooking process, because kids that cook are way more open to eating different types of foods. And then also try to educate your kids on why they need certain foods. So you don't have to spend a ton of time on this, but explain, like, I want you eating yogurt because that has healthy bacteria that are gonna help your immune system. Or yeah, milk builds strong bones, or chicken will grow your muscles. Like, just try to educate them and make them understand why you're trying to have them eat these foods. So extreme picky eating can have some serious consequences. A couple months ago on the news, they reported about a kid that was a very, very picky eater that landed himself in the hospital because of it. Because if you're not eating well, and I mean, I'm talking, one of my clients, he came to me when he was, I think, 13 years old, and he basically ate white bread, bacon, milk, and Cheerios. He ate like 4 things. And his cholesterol was through the roof. He had a ton of acne. Other lab values were off, because if you're not eating properly, a lot of things will start to go wrong. And especially if you think about that was at 13. So imagine once he becomes 50 years old, if that kept up. So if you're not eating well, that will definitely cause vitamin and mineral deficiencies, slowed growth, potentially obesity, because a lot of picky eaters end up just eating refined carbs. So instead of eating a real meal, they might just eat pasta with butter on it, or just eat a bowl of cereal. So they're not going to get the balance, and they're going to end up just getting a lot of calories from refined carbs. So ARFID is basically an eating disorder that has emerged the past couple of years. It's always been around, but now it finally has a label. So it's avoidant restrictive eating disorder. So this is a psychological and sensory disorder. This is if your kid I've had parents tell me this, like, I cannot get my kid to eat broccoli because they will physically vomit if they eat it. And so this is what I'm talking about, like kids that have such adverse reactions to food that it causes major problems. So constriction of mouth tissues, throat, and they actually are fearful of the food. And this does require psychological help. So oftentimes these kids are on the autism spectrum, where they will, if you try to give them, I'll use the example of broccoli again, like they will physically start screaming and crying, and like you can't force it because they're going to be scarred. So this definitely does require the help of a therapist or a psychologist to kind of get them over this bump. And there's more and more psychologists now focusing on this area. So if your kid is one that will cry or throw up if you try to make them eat certain foods, they might have something more than just picky eating. So just to conclude, I know I went through a lot of different topics here. The biggest thing is that I want you to know that all children require a well-balanced diet for proper growth and functioning. So kids go through phases, certainly, where they might not eat something, and then like a year later they will. So I tell parents, don't fret if your kid's kind of in a slump right now where they're not eating that many different foods. But if you see this trend over the next couple of years and it's getting worse, then that would definitely be a time to talk to someone about it. In terms of child athletes, they just be aware that your kid probably does require more calories and more intense meal planning, like around the actual timing of athletic events. And then the benefits of a proper diet, it obviously will enhance athletic performance. So I know last year on the 76ers, they were trying to get one of the players to see a dietitian just because he was already a good player, but he ate very poorly. So they were thinking if he could start eating healthier, he would improve his game. And so that's why most athletic teams do have dietitians and stuff, just because it's so important that the athletes eat healthy to help with their game. But healthy eating also translates to emotional well-being, better brain function, and academic performance. And just try to educate your child and expose them to different foods. Talk to them about like, oh, this food is good for this. And just try to get them more involved in cooking, picking out foods, eating different foods, and make sure you're a good role model too. Like, don't have your kid eating a salad if you're unwilling to eat a salad, because most likely they're not going to do it. And yeah, so my contact information, so I'm located in the Stratford buildings in Wayne, and I do take most major insurance plans. And again, most of them do offer nutrition as a preventative benefit. So for example, Independence Blue Cross offers 6 sessions a year at 100% coverage. So definitely take advantage of that. Everyone on your plan gets it. So yes, any questions?
Yes, we do have a few questions, Kelly. So one of our questions is, do you have any recipes or strategies about how to sneak healthy stuff into pizza? Our one guest, his daughter really likes pizza. So do you have any suggestions?
Yeah, so with pizza, he's probably tried this, but you can now buy those cauliflower crust pizzas. So that, I'm not going to say they're like super healthy, but at least you're getting in a little bit cauliflower, less refined grains. Or if you can make a whole wheat pizza crust, that would be great. And And there are recipes on the internet for actual sauce that you can make where you blend in vegetables. So that's something I have people that have really, really picky eaters is make like a marinara sauce, but you can like blend in spinach and stuff so that you don't actually see it.
Okay, and our next question is, if you have to establish one meal time, what time do you think would be the easiest?
Oh, just in general, huh? That's a tricky question. I would say, I mean, they always say breakfast is the most important meal of the day. I always talk to people, I don't necessarily need you to eat right when you wake up, but ideally within 2 hours of waking up would be great. So I would say if you could schedule for the most important meal, probably your kid's meal between breakfast and lunch, one of those meals would be great. And exact time kind of depends on what time they're waking up. Like if they wake up at 6:30 a.m., that meal time will be drastically different than a kid that's sleeping till 9 a.m. But I always say like that first meal usually kind of sets the precedent for the day because people that skip breakfast oftentimes claim they're not hungry, but that's because later in the day they're eating too much. So then you're not going to be hungry when you wake up.
And we have one last question, Kelly. It says, there's a lot of things to keep in mind when planning your kids' nutrition, but what are the 3 most important things we should focus on for our kids' diets?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, because there's a ton to focus on. I would say make sure you're reading labels and just looking for things that have added sugar. I would say just try to really limit the amount of added sugars. Luckily, they just redid the food labels. So now you can actually look on a label and it will say like carbohydrates, total sugars, and then now there's a line that says added sugars. So there you can see exactly what they're adding to it. So I would try to stay away from the added sugars. Try to make sure your kid is eating at least a cup of vegetables a day. You saw on one of those slides, I mean, the recommendation is ideally like 2 to 3 cups of vegetables a day for older kids. So avoid sugars, eat vegetables, and then kids' dairy or dairy equivalents are really important. So just trying to make sure your kid is getting that in somehow. So whether it's cooking their oatmeal with some form of milk or making a smoothie with yogurt and milk, or eating, part skim mozzarella stick or grilled cheese. Yeah, I would just focus on making sure they're getting in the calcium.
All right, and that was our last question, Kelly.
Very good. Well, thanks so much for having me. And my contact information is there. So if you have any questions, you can feel free to email me. Or if you're interested in setting up an appointment, I work with kids of all ages, generally not infants, but I have had the occasional one or two. But yeah, thanks again.
Great. Thank you, Kelly. And as someone who has a 5-year-old and an 11-month-old, this was some great information. So thank you. And we want to thank everyone for attending. Now, there will be a survey that will be sent out shortly, and we'd love to hear your feedback to help us improve for our future workshops. And just know anyone that participates in the survey will receive Kelly's nutrition handout. Next week, we are hosting another virtual workshop titled HGTV in Real Life, Planning Our Home Renovation. And we hope you can join us. Thank you and stay well.